Britain with Nick Clayton and Don Sheeny. Thank you, Don, very much for joining us over in Dubai and giving us your perspective on what's happening in the US, some of the trends that are taking place. I can see you were being very polite as well when it came to government legislation. So thank you, Don, for joining us. Now we're going to move straight on before our coffee break. We've got around the world in 60 minutes. What are the trends to emerge? Up-and-coming brands, and what do the investors, what's their viewpoint from these brands that are coming into the marketplace now? And to moderate our session, we have Tobias Madstedt, who's Managing Director and Principal of Beyond Hospitality. Tobias founded Beyond Hospitality in 2009, specializing in hotel development as well as F&B master planning and concept creation. He provides advisory services for both owners and operators, and also you do operational review and recruitment. I think you've worked for some of the most luxurious hotels in the world, so we couldn't have a better person to moderate this next session.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Toby.
That I said before? Perfect. It's actually way too loud now. All right, I stopped screaming. So I think the idea of fun dining versus fine dining, that restaurants become a lot more approachable, they're affordable, unpretentious, still refined, still outstanding cuisine, but they're becoming a lot more interactive. They become a lot more an entertainment component. It is not purely about the food. It's really about the overall composition of great F&B venues. Celebrity chefs, it's probably one of the things we started 10, 15 years ago in Las Vegas, and probably one of the main culprits in that. It's something that is happening everywhere, all the luxury hotels, you have it in Dubai, and it's something that is spreading throughout. And it really gives you a great instant credibility and a great brand association, and it works extremely well. Farm to table, farm to fork, it's something that I really believe is something that's very, very positive. Instead of food traveling all over the world, what is local, what's in season, what is happening, the local overdrives, the sustainability effort, organic products. Also going back to a certain amount of simplicity. I can name you probably 10 restaurants offhand where a roasted chicken is a prime dish. It's authentic flavors, genuine food. Basics executed extremely well. It's not about the drizzle and the drops of the plates anymore. It's non-gimmicky. It's value for money and using the best products possible. Formality is something that is going more and more away. And being in Dubai, sometimes it's hard to see that formality is not really as prominent anymore. But restaurants with white tablecloths is more and more disappearing. It's about informal service, but still in a very, very refined way. Peruvian food is something that's popping up throughout. And if you're looking at the geography of Peru, it's really amazing. It's 5,500 kilometers long. So from the tip of Gibraltar to Helsinki, it's an incredible long country. So it covers all the different climate zones. And it also goes from the coast to the top of the Andes, which are higher than any mountain in Europe or in the Americas. So you have an incredible, interesting flavor profile and ingredients. And that one mixed with the cultural influences from the Japanese and Chinese immigrants in the 18th century results in great, great food products. And I think it's food that will be equally as strong as sushi grew up on us in the last 20 years. 1985, nobody ate sushi outside of Japan, and now you see sushi as a main staple throughout the world. On the beverage side, specialty bars with handcrafted cocktails where beverage is treated the same way as great food. Great ingredients, a lot of love and attention to detail of the product. Not necessarily all alcohol-based. House-made sodas, handcrafted soft drinks, homemade ginger ale, great profit opportunities. And the success is not necessarily purely based on serving alcohol and expensive wines and spirits. The next area is tea. You probably heard that Starbucks bought a company called Tivana, and they want to grow about 100 to 150 restaurants per year. Tea bars, herbal infusion, iced teas that are made in a very creative way, mixed drinks with tea. And again, particularly for this part of the world, in Asia and India, it's a great opportunity, great profit margins. Probably remember the liquid lunch from 15, 20 years ago, consisting of 3 martinis. Well, liquid lunch, I was just in Miami, and I had a $14 fresh juice, and there are lines at the door. It is something that is in the health-conscious world, something that's very prevalent and works very well. Going back to the local ingredients, local spirits, artisan spirits, something is particular to a region, to a city, even to particular hotels, using not mixed drinks, but really spirits as a prime anchor and the hook of the product. In terms of restaurant concepts, burger bars, I've never heard of a burger bar actually going bankrupt, and every celebrity chef has a burger bar, and everybody likes to have a good burger. It has great success throughout. Beach and pool clubs, Café del Mar in Ibiza, throughout the Mediterranean in the US, and actually the one here in Abu Dhabi apparently is very successful as well. The whole concept of day clubs as a counterpart to nightclubs, huge profitability in there. Coup d'etat in Asia, so it's really a global component. Tapas-style small plate restaurants. I'm not talking about Spanish food, but I'm talking about food that is not the traditional appetizer, main course, dessert, but really mixing up the way food is being presented and being shared at the table, a lot more interactive. Restaurants that morph into nightclubs. We had lunch today upstairs. It's a supper club. Again, how do you extend the operating hours? How can you make it more profitable? How can you move from 3-4 hours of dinner income to 8, 9, 10 hours of dinner income? Coffee bars, if you're looking at growth factors of companies like Starbucks and all the gazillion others that are coming up, great opportunity with coffee, huge margins in that. Gourmet fast food. Fast food doesn't necessarily need to be the tasteless hamburger patty. It can be great quality. And again, prime example here of what is possible in malls, outstanding quality products. Coffee shop food is not necessarily the basic ingredients anymore. You're using foie gras and prawns and lobster and artisan cheese of highest quality. Health-conscious fast food. People are very aware of calories, as Dawn has mentioned earlier on, and how can you have tasty, quick service meals? I want to go now from what happened in the last couple of years and right now to what do I think is going to happen in the next few years. The impact of social media. It's not directly food related, but it has an incredible aspect on the marketing of your restaurants, on the promotions, on the launch, on how full your restaurant is, what you're doing with OpenTable, Facebook, Yelp, any of these products. Before people come to your restaurant, they know exactly what's going on and what you can do with promoting your venues purely through these channels has an incredible influence, and it will only grow. I think it's a total upside down of our industry. Traditional business models are being challenged. You remember what Airbnb did to hotels or what Uber does to taxis. What's going to be the equivalent for our restaurant industry? What will happen eventually? Is there an app that might make your restaurant not exist anymore? And there are some very, very interesting models out there that will affect all of us in the restaurant business. Restaurants and bars that are morphing away from you either going to a bar or to the restaurant, it all becomes one space. What's the next food fad going to be? Remember the no fat, no carbs, no trans fat from the last couple of years? Right now, everything is gluten-free. Drives me crazy. And some people of you will disagree with me that gluten-free is an important thing, but it is going to come. What's going to be the wheat-free menus, lactose-free? How do you cater to these different requirements on your menus, how you're going to operate your restaurants, and what will be the next thing and how you're going to be ready for that? Ancient grains that are coming up. Nobody heard of quinoa 5 years ago. We had 3 different dishes yesterday at Jumeirah. What are the next things that are going to come up, and how can we use it? How can we be on the forefront of the next trend? Vegetarian and vegan, more and more people are actually following that. I don't think this is a fad. It's something that will be with us to stay. How are our restaurants going to cater to a vegetarian and vegan customer? Celebrity farmers. We talked about celebrity chefs. What is the next thing? Who is the next attraction? And there are many restaurants that are already marking on the restaurant menu where the food is actually coming from. It's not a no-name product anymore. It was Elsa the cow that you're eating there. Urban farming is something you start seeing in supermarkets, the roofs of supermarkets, at school buildings, at restaurants. It is very, very interesting. It's a fun twist. Destination food halls. You probably all heard of Italy in New York, which did $75 million last year, opened in Chicago and LA. There's a Latin version planned in Miami right now. There are other food halls with the same spirit of Italy that are going to come in other parts of the world. It will be a great replacement for your typical food court at a mall. Non-chef celebrity restaurants. Somebody mentioned that this morning that a celebrity chef is probably recognized by less than 1% of the population. Well, what are the other celebrities with a much higher factor where you can get the same name recognition and the same credibility of? This one is an example of a concept we've done for Ernie Els called the Big Easy, and a great opportunity to branch out to different aspects of publicity. Insect-based food sounds weird, sounds strange. Looking at this grasshopper there in the bacon wrap might not be that as appealing, but if you're looking at food bars where you have the same ingredients, it's perfectly wrapped, it's healthy, it's good for you, it might sound weird, but I think it's something that will definitely come. And the last one is food printing. You're looking at products like that, it's actually coming out of a computer, it's printed food, different ingredients, and whether it's cereals or chocolates or pasta, it's certainly something very unusual that will eventually come our way, and that eventually might be fairly soon. So that was try to do a 5-minute rundown for Jennifer. It's kind of there. Love to have some fabulous experts on the field with me right now. If you can join us all, and we can talk about what's happening in the specific areas of the world. Hey, Stefan. Hey, Eze. Well, we are very, very fortunate. We have 6 fabulous experts from different parts of the world. And what we're trying to cover is a different continents and to talk about what's happening throughout the world. And I'd like to start with Stefan from Interconti Hotels in Bangkok. Stefan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what's happening in Asia Pacific?
Sure. I'm based in Bangkok, but was lucky to spend 12 years here. So when I'm going to give you a perspective of what's happening in Southeast Asia and Australasia, I can also compare it a little bit with what's happening in the Middle East as well. I'll focus on 5-6 cities. It's a big geography, Southeast Asia, Australia, but I'll focus on Bangkok, Singapore, Melbourne, Sydney. Can't ignore those two. And even go across to Shanghai. I'm not an expert on China, but I'll give you some views on Shanghai and even smaller cities like Hanoi. But one thing, and even coming here, arriving late last night, the one aspect that I see a lot in Southeast Asia and in Australia is the spirit of the entrepreneur. It may be because unit costs are lower, leases are less expensive, payroll costs are lower, the costs of entry are lower, and so you get people trying a few things that might not be able to try in more expensive markets in the West or even here, where costs have risen significantly in the last 2-3 years. There is unmistakably an obsession with Americana here. Rightly or wrongly, some stats produced by Horizon actually recently showed that as much as 60% of the brands in some of the malls are of American origin. It's not because people have a huge appetite for food that comes from America. It's because Americans are so good at franchising. They're so good at packaging up formulaic franchises. They've been doing it for 50 years. They're the world's best. They remain the world's best. But Southeast Asia, hardly present in the malls. You see KFC, BK, McDonald's, but casual dining and fine casual, very rarely. You rarely see it, which is an interesting aspect. And it could be because of their entrepreneurial spirit that they have over there. It could be that they have been cooking as a culture for longer. Certainly, women working as well as an impact over there. Women deciding on what gets eaten as well in malls. If you watch groups of people in a very different kind of way to other parts of the world. And eating out of home, eating away from home, has always been very high in Southeast Asia. Let me talk about the cities, and then I'll move on. Bangkok, fabulously vibrant city. Tourism plays a huge part there. If you get a chance to go there, do have a look at Ian Kitachai, a local chef who's produced a few things of interest. Isaiah, Hide and Seek, and Eat Me are three fantastic concepts. And the guy has taken Thai food and moved it to the next stage, if you like. Ashley Sutton's here, and Ashley was a key part of Iron Fairies, Maggie Chu's, which are world-class, particularly Iron Fairies, in terms of design, absolutely world-class concepts. And also we have concepts like Bellino, small, often expat-owned, interestingly, expats that leave the West, find a home in Thailand and set up businesses out there, which is quite interesting and works. Singapore, Jason Atherton, who we at Intercon have signed with recently, announced yesterday, is having a fantastic time in Singapore. He has a concept called Esquina Tapas Bar, and Pollen, which is doing really well. And Singapore is a wonderful melting pot of different ethnicities. Sam Leong is a chef that does very well there. And they even have a concept of no-name clubs, no-name bars. So bars are open with no name, which breaks every marketing rule ever written on the planet, but it gets your attention, it gets your interest and your intrigue. Australia is built on its immigrants. The Italians, the Serbs, the Croats, the Greeks have built a fantastic food culture out there. And I recommend having a look at Ghazi in Melbourne, a very funky Greek concept. And I just hope someone does that with Indian food at some point. They're taking Greek food and really making it quite almost rock and roll. And Movida, a Latin American concept, a tapas bar. There's also Guy Grossi at one of our properties, the Intercon Melbourne, and he's very good. He's a wonderful Italian-Australian chef who really delivers a lot of energy down there. In Sydney, tacos. Have a look at Guzman y Gomez, which takes what Taco Bell have done the last 40, 50 years, makes it far more funky and far more interesting. And Mr. Wong is also worth looking at in Sydney, which takes Oriental food and again makes it, adds an edge to it. I think if I quickly talk about the future, I think that as customers travel more, especially in this region as well, they may begin to develop an interest in things from other geographies, from Southeast Asia. I think the franchising success of Noodle House, which was born here, shows that there is interest in something which is other than the usual things that get franchised, so good luck to them. And also Just Falafel, which has been a fantastic franchising story, again born here and popping up in the US and the UK. So things that we can learn from this geography, if you like.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Stefan. So from Asia Pacific, let's continue on the Pacific coast. Let's move over to Latin America. Ilse Penasco is CEO of Corio Restaurants Group. Gaston Corio is he's the #1 chef in Latin America, has been voted number 15 in the world, and has about 30, 35 restaurants, Ilse. So tell us what's happening in your part of the world.
Excellent. I'll talk briefly about Peru. Tobias already did a little bit. But for those of you who haven't tried our food, the Peruvian food, Peru is a country with the most microclimates in the world, a very rich ocean. and a mixture of cultures, the Andean, the Spanish, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Italian, for 500 years have been created this perfect, quote unquote, fusion that we have been taking to the world for the past 10 or 12 years. Gaston, like Tobias mentioned, is my partner and the leading chef in the company. He's a Peruvian, he's the ambassador of Peruvian cuisine to the world. And what we did, and I'm going to explain what we feel is the next trend, but different types of food or regional foods of Peru, like for example the ceviche, we took out and made a concept out of. So you have the cevicheria concept, and we envision that for every sushi bar there will be a ceviche bar in the future. The typical mom and pop or bistro kind of space, we created a Peruvian concept around it called Tanta, which is your everyday restaurant where you have comfort food based on Peruvian gastronomy, but with some international flair as well. And this trend today continues, and you find, for example, street food that your typical cart where you find ceviches are now being taken over by young creative chefs and making different kind of ceviches with a different, unique twist and making it even fresher or better quality. And I think the challenge today for companies is to identify those chefs. You find, for example, in Peru today, young chefs that take up local, a stall in a market, and they start serving tasting menus, which 10 years ago you wouldn't ever find in a marketplace. So how do you take these young creative entrepreneurs and take their concepts and make them into a global opportunity? You have a ceviche bar, for example, or you can have a gourmet sandwich. There's a whole tradition of sandwiches in Peru based on all these cultural influences. How you take that and make it into a concept that you can export to the world. And these are most of the trends that we see happening in Peru and opportunities coming in the future.
And how about the rest of Latin America, Brazil, Argentina? What is happening in that?
I would say that the countries with the strongest gastronomies, like Mexico, and obviously Mexico has been doing it for many years, but Mexico started, I would say, in the lower end of the restaurant business, and they're now coming again on the high end, and that's an opportunity there. And Argentina as well has all the barbecue de parrilla concepts, as well as Brazil, actually, and they're working on that as well, for many years. But I would say the trends today come more from the street into the more established restaurant world.
Great, thanks, Ezio.
Thank you.
Well, for more local, Samantha is joining us, the food diva, based here in Dubai, and love to hear your thoughts of what's happening in the Middle East, Dubai, and everywhere around here.
Sure. There are 4 key trends that I actually really want to highlight here. Firstly, it's an obvious one, but I think it's a very critical and important one for a maturing market. But the restaurant scene has, in the last year, and the last few years actually, very much geared towards celebrity chef concepts and international restaurant chains. But the last year has seen it mature, and we're now actually seeing a lot of homegrown, locally developed concepts here, led by the success of concepts like Noodle House, Oku, etc. But we've now got restaurants like Tomo, La Serre, Roberto's, Kubara, Atelier M, Table 9, and Tortuga are just some examples of locally developed concepts here. Secondly, and slightly tying into that as well, licensing laws are changing. So it's not just restaurants in hotels that serve alcohol. But here in Dubai, we have DIFC, we have Souk Al Bahar, we have Dubai Marina. In Abu Dhabi, we have Sadiyat, Souk Al Bariyat, Eastern Mangroves now. And they are encouraging more restaurateurs to open shop here. So we're seeing a move away from hoteliers bringing in recognized brands and actual independent restaurant chains coming in here. Thirdly, Emirati cuisine, which has been mostly home-based and really restricted to a handful of restaurants. It's often neglected, sadly, in favor of the more popular and I think much marketed Levantine cuisine. But it is changing for the better slightly, but we still have a long way to go, I think, before a business traveler or a holidaymaker seeks out local dishes before any other cuisine here. When you're in Naples, we order pizza, but here, does anyone ever think of ordering or asking for slow-roasted lamb uzi or chicken mushbous? Probably not. And again, tying into that one and coming on to my last point here, Arabic fare is progressing into the fun dining arena. And if you've not experienced Kubara, you will see it tonight. But we now have a restaurant here that has actually embraced the Arabesque culture that we live in, and it's taken it to another level with some fusion twists. It's licensed, it's chef-driven, and we have a top-end restaurant that really, really embraces the culture that we live in. And we're going to see more of that moving in to this year and next year.
What else do you see happening in the next couple of years, both here and in the region, in terms of?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on here, but when it comes to the Middle Eastern side, I'd like to see a bigger focus on Emirati and Middle Eastern cuisine. And we will see that with Greb Malouf's restaurant opening here, Silvana Row opening here. We also have the first top-end licensed Emirati licensed restaurant, Asila, opening at the Radisson as well. But I also think we will see more authentic Mexican, not Tex-Mex. Peruvian is coming here with Koya opening at the Four Seasons. And also Korean fare, I think, will make a bigger impact here as well. But one thing I would like to say is I think we've got enough churrasquerias and enough Spanish restaurants here, so please, no more of that.
Great, thank you so much, Samantha. Amy, who's a managing partner from the Puccini Group, is here, and she's going to talk about the Americas.
Well, actually, it was you tapped on almost every trend that's actually happening in America at the moment. Obviously, we're becoming much more health-focused, and you'll see all the debates about whether we can have soda or not in New York, as Bloomberg started that. We are seeing calorie counts and menus in no particular order. One of the big things is sort of the group dining and family style, and this whole detraction from formality and creating a more casual experience. And it's also tapping into that younger generation as well that's texting and tweeting about this and talking about it online. Social media is going to be a big, big, interesting thing to maintain awareness of, because they're looking for the experience and they're talking about it. So as you had pointed out, everything that they need to know about the restaurant is going to be online before they even get there. Italy, again, is a big thing as well. That's been a trend, too. But what I'm seeing, too, in San Francisco is we're seeing a lot of gourmet food trucks pop up. So we're seeing various different cuisines on this more casual experience, and you're seeing the various food trucks that specialize in the Mexican and the Spanish and all of the different food components. So gourmet on wheels. When I grew up, it was good humor, and we were happy to have that. One of my favorites is this whole hyper-local that's happening. It's the roof on the garden, but it's within a certain mile radius that we're buying from our local farmers, and everything is more farm fresh. In terms of mixology, we're seeing a lot more different mixology, but what's also been introduced in at least our San Francisco area is the twist to beer mixology and becoming more beer connoisseurs. Our restaurants are becoming more restaurant celebrity-driven versus chef celebrity-driven. So minor twists in all of these different global trends that are happening on a micro level. We have these pop-up containers that are actually happening in our neighborhood, like taking and repurposing containers where we have pop-up restaurants. I've already discovered my favorite, Smitten's ice cream, that makes the ice cream in front of you. So people becoming aware of what's in their food at the time that they're seeing it and making it fresh on premises and allowing the customer to actually see that. Beer gardens, making use of these social spaces. A whole different beer garden has popped up as well. These are all really great and interesting trends and pretty much the same of what you had mentioned earlier, but I'd like to kind of touch on what that really kind of means. You know, we have all these trends. We need to understand who our customer is and where its location is and how that works. One of the things that we were talking about earlier this morning is not just the community in which you're in, because certain venues are going to work better in major cities versus tertiary cities, but also understanding your trade area, because your trade area is not as big as you think it is, and sometimes you need to expand your concept to make that bigger. Certain people in cities will travel to restaurants because it's special, it's a special occasion, but most of the time they're going to stay within their local area, and you need to appeal to all of that. So as you develop and think about your concepts that cover all these various trends, think about your marketable area and how often you're going to get people there and how far their radius is that they spread out on that.
Great, thank you so much. It's always amazing when you hear that and you're thinking of the typical international perception of America. Everybody eats nothing but at McDonald's in America. And
Absolutely not.
Then you hear these fabulous things, and it's great to hear. Dogan, tell us what is happening in Turkey and your part of the world. Thanks for joining us.
I mean, I think it will be only fair to say that the Turkish restaurants business, food and beverages, is having a second renaissance. We were famous for being meat eaters, focusing on our kebabs, dining out as a family, and that was more or less that when it comes to commercial dining. But with the changing sociology of the country, I think there are a number of triggers that actually change the industry as well, both today and going forward. The obvious triggers, I can name at least 4. The first is the increase of income. It was $2,000 10 years ago. Now we're looking at $10,000 per person. The population, what I always find to be a very striking statistics, is 60% of the Turkish population is under the age of 30. They're mostly young professionals. They work hard. The work ethics in Turkey is pretty similar to the US attitude, where you work hard, you play hard, so you don't really spend much time at home. So a lot of people start dining outside. The role of the women has increased, being sort of the hotbed of secularity on this region. More and more women are engaged in a professional life, so people go out more. They don't cook at home, so the family eating became a social event. And in fact, what you can see is that when you want to invest in restaurants in Turkey, you have to go with either one of the following concepts. You either have to create sort of a second living room for these families and friends, because they have nowhere to go. Going home too late, it's just not doable. Or you have to create an exotic experience. In the words of Nick from Jumeirah, you have to create an entertain me, exotic experience that they're going to go, that they want to come back just for the experience. Food, quality, good service, they all have to be there, but the experiences element is coming up. Social media is a huge thing, in particular Instagram in Turkey. It actually turned food into an object of desire, almost a fetish. You see millions of young professionals posting photos on Instagrams of everything they have eating or not eating. I mean, you can literally see people taking photos of their macarons that they're never going to eat because they're going to gain weight, but the picture is nevertheless there. The local market is buoyant in the sense that there are a number of local Turkish chefs coming up. Mehmet Gürs is one of them, who created 2 restaurants, Mikla and Num Num, and we'll get to that maybe later on, but Num Num was a success story in the sense that it managed to attract private equity investment from one of the larger private banking industries in Turkey. There's a gentleman called Özgür Chef who calls himself Free Chef, basically focusing on meat. I have to admit that the market is still very much meat-based. The vegetarian cuisine, it's rare, it's niche, but it's not there yet. But it's all an up-and-coming, booming market, basically demand for anything and everything that is different. It's a sizable market, I would say, for this part of the world. The whole food industry in Turkey, we're talking about $20 billion. And your average Turkish household is spending 40% of its monthly outcome on food and basically eating outside. The client-driven customization is also a phenomenon in Turkey. We see more and more, not the concept of, it used to be the product was from the kitchen to the client. Now it's more client to the kitchen. We're telling what should be happening at the kitchen. A lot of customization on our restaurants. So that's what we see. What I find quite interesting and also it provides me with a lot of optimism in terms of the market going forward. We see a lot of the local powerhouses, traditional big conglomerates investing in industries such as construction, energy, banking, finance. They're investing in the food and beverages business. The Doge Group that came up with the day1 brand, very strong player. Sabancı family is also coming up. If you ask me to name 4 families that will be the forefront of the Turkish economy, 2 of them are already in the restaurants business. So we'll expect to see more of those. Foreign entities are already there. Jumeirah is already there with the agency in Urbano. Jamie Oliver opened up Jamie's Italian through franchising. So that shows interest from celebrity chefs as well. Straight restaurants, there's always room for further growth there. Because as I said, the moment you put the concept together, there's always someone buying for it. And coffee chains, naturally, they've been there for years, but there's still a lot more demand through franchising.
Super. Well, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
And our last panelist is Peter, who is a managing director from Horizons, who's going to tell us what's happening in the UK.
And Europe.
And Europe.
Thank you.
Minor little detail.
No, that's all right. I think the mantra that I've got is more, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But there's 2 or 3 contextual bits I think it's very helpful to understand. First of all, Europe varies enormously from Iceland to Turkey, from Finland to Portugal. So we're covering a wide range of different cuisines and a wide range of different cultures. Secondly, the eating out market across all those countries is in the popular sector. We're talking restaurants, we're talking about quick service. We're not talking about fine dining. We're not talking about dining in hotels because hotels provide breakfast and they provide meals for functions and events. Right. So it's popular catering is where the market is. And the final thing, and very important thing, is you have to realize that the economies have all been through 5-6 years of really, really tough conditions, and some of them are still in very tough conditions, which sort of leads me then to the more bit, which is about the operation. This is the big impact of the last few years. Popular caterers have succeeded when they have got more footprint. And this means that brands have been in a good position because they can open more outlets, they can open more outlets and more outlets. So if you've got more footprint, that then gives you a bigger customer base. And so the next trick is then to capture more of that customer base by getting more people in your catchment area, in your defined market, to come and eat in your place. And a lot of efforts are done in that respect. And also capturing day parts, so not opening merely at lunchtime, but at breakfast and throughout the day allows you to capture more people. And the final more is getting customers to spend more per meal. Whether that is just hoping that they're going to buy more, or re-engineering the menu to make them spend more, providing more meal deals, which have the effect in the end of getting them to spend more, and using our staff effectively to upsell. So the 3 mores are more footprint, more capture, and more spend per meal. I think going forward, there are a number of things that are happening which are important. One is provenance, you've mentioned it earlier. Where food comes from, knowing about the food is important to consumers across Europe. Providing food which is authentic but has got regional changes and is different, but it's got some basis that it's not just dreamt up in the bath. And providing customer information. In the UK, later this year, you're going to have to be knowledgeable about 14 different allergens that appear on your menu and tell your customers about it. That includes gluten, but it includes things like lupin as well. So the final trends that we're seeing are more casual eating generally, just becoming more casual. Premiumizing, which means selling the same product but making it more valuable, adding value, and providing food where people are, which means perhaps more street food, it seems to be the way that things are moving. So more casual, more premium, and more street food.
Great, thank you so much. Before we go to your questions and answers, I think we covered the global restaurant component of GRIF pretty well. But I would love to have your one-sentence answer to where would you invest money in the restaurant world in your particular part of the world? Stefan, start with your one quick sentence. Where would you invest your own money in restaurants?
Whereby, what you mean, which sector or which geography? Is that what you mean?
No, what sector? What do you think is the best way to invest your money? Where about and what concept would you do?
In one long sentence? Low capex, high margin, popular chicken. I did it for you. There you are.
Then?
Well, ethnic restaurants, good location. That's just that.
Okay.
Location, well-concepted, casual restaurant.
Top-end Middle Eastern.
Fun, casual, Peruvian in Brazil.
I'm going to be off the wall and say I'd invest in the lawyers. They're the guys who make money.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was outstanding. I really enjoyed it and would love to hand it over to you, to your questions, to anybody here on the panel, whatever you'd like to ask, and we will try to come up with hopefully brilliant answers. Anybody has some thoughts? Go ahead. Do we have a microphone? Yep, perfect.
I just wanted to ask Samantha about the Middle Eastern trends. You basically talked about what's happening in Dubai, and I kind of wonder, do you also have an opinion on the other countries? Because I think the trends are very different between countries, and even within a country like Saudi Arabia, trends are different between each region. So we say Eastern, Western, or Central Saudi Arabia. So what's your thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. The other markets are very, very different. I think Dubai is even different to Abu Dhabi slightly. But the rest of the Middle East are countries in their own right. You can't really group them as Middle Eastern trends as such. For instance, yes, Saudi Arabia restrictions with alcohol, etc., reflect on the concepts that would be developed there. My expertise is very much in the UAE, and I can see the UAE is driving the trends elsewhere at the moment. And you can see that having a knock-on effect in places like Qatar, for instance, whose restaurant scene is picking up a little. But yes, I mean, if you're looking for specifics in terms of Saudi, I'm not your person.
Also about local food here in Dubai, and you said it's not existent yet, but I think it is, and I actually know it is existent in some touristic places like Fanar.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're very existent in very small, low-end shops all around Dubai. So I think there is a clear trend there, and it's definitely coming. And if I would wanted to invest in Dubai, I would invest there, and not in Middle Eastern high-end cuisine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a valid point. When I said Emirati cuisine is coming out of hiding, so we are seeing a handful of restaurants. Al Fanar is a good example. You have one in Dubai. Well, actually, you have a couple in Dubai Mall. You have the Camel Milk Cafe, and then you have an Emirati restaurant there. So there are quite a few. But I'm talking about taking it to the next level and making it top-end fun dining as well. I think there is definitely a market for that. And I would group that along with Middle Eastern cuisine as well. But I would love to see more Emirati restaurants here. I think there's definitely demand for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else got some questions on the left?
Well, I'm afraid this is going to be the second poorly articulated question for me today, but bear with me. Do you see any trends that would suggest that people start using food as a way of articulating their identity, who they are, in the same way that they are already doing with the music they listen or the clothes that they are wearing? And is there any such definable trend that you see, and what shape does it take? Oh, I should probably address it to someone, but since it's such a poorly articulated question, I would just ask whoever jumps with an answer would be the right person to address it to.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that question. It is exactly this phenomenon of Instagram that I referred to. I mean, you see that in Turkey with such young population that people start to define themselves by the restaurants they go to, the atmosphere that they experience there, and the food that they eat there. It's all online, on Facebook, on Instagram, and that's how they actually socialize with their peers. So that is definitely a phenomenon, and I think that definitely ties to this famous concept that almost everybody agrees on. You have to be creating destinations for your customers in the restaurants business. They're no longer amenities to the hotels or the shopping malls. They have to be destinations on their own, because that will be part of the identity of your customer, in particular for the up-and-coming young professionals who are not afraid to spend their income on such restaurants.
But if that happens, do you see a movement away from the restaurant as the unit of analysis towards the dish, let's say? And do you see a movement away from the brand of the restaurant towards the brand of whoever that actually creates that dish, from a company to a person? And
to be perfectly honest, not really. I mean, no matter how good the dish is, in particular for the Turkish market or Istanbul market, where it's most buoyant, if your location is not right, if you haven't been able to establish this concept of being a destination and experience of its own, no matter how good the dish is, no matter how good it looks, you will not get clients. So you have to be in the right location with the right concept, and you have to be selling the experience. So I don't think it's going to shift from restaurants to dishes. The dish naturally is an important element, but not the only one.
Very interesting point. Can I just add to that? Someone's going to say Starbucks at some points, but Starbucks is a Howard Schultz. It's nothing to do with the coffee and all about the third place. That's what he's selling. And it just so happened that coffee's the medium for him to pay the rent. The whole thing was based on that line. It's interesting. It strips away ethnicity, and it's all about its core activity.
It's the overall composition, the experience as a whole. Great food alone doesn't fill your restaurant. It's an absolute prerequisite, but that alone you cannot base your success on just serving good food, because that is just the basic requirement.
I think it is. It is creating the experience, because people are not looking for the all-in-one meal, and people are defined by who they are. You know, a vegetarian is not going to McDonald's for a burger. It's not happening. You're going to restaurants that appeal to that person and that customer base. And all of these places should be appealing to those customers that want to be there. I don't want to go to Spanish tapas and have pizza. It really does start to identify who you are. And I think as experiences and as our young travelers travel and have disposable income, they want to know that they're sushi experts or tapas experts. They want to flavor all these global trends. And of course, in America and all these major regions, we have every food covered. And it's finding that right place and that right area that identifies that customer and grabs them in.
We as restaurateurs have talked about it for decades, about the environment, about the experience, about the atmosphere, this wonderful spurious thing. If you say to my 20-year-old son, this restaurant has a good atmosphere, this is a good atmosphere. Now, if everyone's doing that, connecting, that to him is a good atmosphere. So we have to revisit what that means.
Right.
And another, I'm sorry.
No, just to say that I get more requests in terms of can you recommend a restaurant with atmosphere rather than can you recommend a Spanish restaurant. So it tends to be atmosphere first, secondly location in terms of what part of town, and thirdly cuisine and food.
And the initial question was about, do people define themselves by the places where they eat out? And a very important point to me is that people eat out under many, many different hats. So sometimes they'll be going out with the family, sometimes they'll be going out with friends, sometimes they'll be going out for business at different times of the day. So the question of self-definition, certainly in established mature markets like Europe, it doesn't really apply. The outlet has to appeal to the person at their particular need state rather than who they are.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Yes, good afternoon. Tobias, you spoke about the Peruvian cuisine being a tendency in the world. So I would like to ask Ircio about how is this tendency going to be taking place? And here.
Okay.
And although the experts might know about Peruvian cuisine, why is it not still that well known around the world? What needs to happen? What is the cuisine going to be different? And how is that tendency going to be taking place?
Well, I think it takes some time for any new food that's been introduced to the world to gather momentum. I think we're at the beginning of that big momentum. You now see Peruvian restaurants of a high standard in many of the major cities. Our company itself is already, we're opening at the Mandarin in Miami, we're in Chicago, we're in San Francisco. There are very good Peruvians in London already, all over Latin America. There are several different brands and concepts of Peruvian cuisine in most capital cities and some regional cities of Latin America as well. I think the fact that many of us have mentioned Peruvian food today on this panel is a sign that it's getting there. And I think we're at that tipping point where in the next 5 years there's going to be an explosion of new Peruvian restaurants coming to every major city.
Okay. One more? Go ahead.
No, she's got the mic there.
In our business, we see a lot of requests for atmosphere in our restaurant design. But the other thing we see now is that the income is going to be 50-50, 50% drinks, 50% from food, and the larger venue. How do you see that coming? Probably in Dubai, as I mean, have the company here in Dubai.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. A lot of our concept we have today in our business, I'm a design company, is a mixture 50-50 between food and drinks. Just after they're asked to make a very atmospheric venue where people want to feel, just like you said, but they can't get the finance to stack up if they're not focusing on the before the dinner drink, and then how to get people to stay and buy 1 or 2 or 3 more drinks after the meal. How do you?
Well, I think it becomes a lot more seamless, the transition between bar and restaurant, really integrated into one experience, rather than the traditional separation. And in order to run a successful restaurant, if you're just serving dinner from 7 to 9:30, it will be very hard to make money with that. So the more you can do to extend that business in both directions and capture that beverage market and continue to have that custom in your restaurant, which actually adds to the atmosphere and gets away from the formality, I have my 3-course meal and after that I go home, that will contribute to the overall success of your restaurant.
And I would add that if you have a bar program with a mixologist that really develops unique products that sometimes are tied to specific dishes, you can also carry it on that way.
It's about making the drink component as important as the food component.
Tobias, I think we got one more question.
Absolutely.
Finale. Okay, it might seem like a silly question, but bear with me. And it's open to anybody. What do you define as Middle Eastern food? What do you mean by Middle East? I know what it means to me, and it probably means different things to everybody. But it's a tricky question. What is it?
It's one of the oldest cuisines in the world. It's dominated by grilling, would be the obvious. But it's tricky because, as Samantha said, the Levantine influence is different. It had a French piece for a while. It's got a Mediterranean. It's got they can grow things.
But the Levantine
there.
is Bilad al-Sham, which is like the greater Syria and Lebanese. But I'll tell you how I define, or what I think of Middle Eastern food, is Arabic food. But yet, when you say Middle East food, do you mean specifically Arabic food, or?
I think it's open to interpretation. I think anyone can interpret it any way they like. Kubara has interpreted it one way. It's taken it to a more modern level. Greg Malouf is going to do it a little bit more traditionally. Silvana will be a bit more creative. So everyone is doing it differently, and I think everyone needs to do it differently. So if someone wants to interpret it as overall Arabic, if someone wants to take that as North African, it's entirely up to them.
But North African is Arabic.
Yeah. So it can be interpreted in different ways. I think it's just up to them what that cuisine turns out to be creatively and how they choose to market it. But I think the more, the merrier. because we need more choice in that arena when it comes to top-end dining.
I'd echo that, and I'd say I don't think it actually really matters. What does matter is the inspiration that it can give to cuisines around the world. And restaurants generally really are looking for another thing, the next thing. And it's, you know, South America, Latin America is coming up the charts. The Far East has done it, but is also successful. African food, Middle Eastern food hardly register in Europe, and yet there's great potential there. So I don't think it actually matters. I think it's a question of providing the inspiration.
Jonathan, I think we are out of time, and we have a fabulous coffee break waiting outside. So thank you very much for your time. It was a great pleasure.